This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations.
We want families to come here and gain insightful strategies that empower them to successfully teach diverse learners at home.
Hosted by founder and CEO of SPED Homeschool, Peggy Ployer.
Our goal is that these powerful weekly conversations will boost your confidence to cultivate the best at-home learning environment for your student.
For more homeschool resources, go to spedhomeschool.com. You're listening to Empowering Homeschool Conversations with Peggy Ployer.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations. Today, we are going to talk about extended learning, how to homeschool after high school. You may think, okay, what does that mean? Well, Stephanie Buckwalter is a repeat guest. She's been on this show many times, and I'm excited to have her back. Stephanie is a curriculum developer and the creator of the ELARP Method of homeschooling for students who are 2 or more years behind grade level in several core subjects or simply stuck in perpetual kindergarten. She believes that the first step to homeschooling a special needs child is to assume intelligence. Once you realize there is more going on intellectually than your child can express, it opens a whole new world of learning. Her family of 5 children has done homeschooling, private school, public school, including the IEP process. In addition to homeschooling for over 18 years, Stephanie has taught classes locally and online and helped start a robotics club, a classical education co-op, and a special needs homeschool co-op. Her heart is to use her unique experience to help others experience success in teaching their unique learners. Welcome, Stephanie, back to the show.
Hi, Peggy. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I love the topic that we're hitting on because we're kind of hitting that mid-year point. And I know a lot of parents, when you're homeschooling high school, you've got that senior and you're like, I don't think we even have a clue where we're going next. I remember being there. And so maybe to give some encouragement, some ideas. And Stephanie is very practical. I'll just let you know ahead of time. She's got some great ideas on how to think through the process, things that you can do. So if you have a student who is kind of transitioning out of high school and you're going, we've been homeschooling, but not sure where it's going after that. We're going to talk about that today and just some options that you have that Stephanie wants you to consider, maybe out of the box types of things that you could do after high school that maybe aren't as traditional, but yet will still extend and have your student keep learning through that process. And if you're joining us live, I see there's some of you on already. Just know that you can put your comments and questions in the feed. We're live on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitch, as well as Twitter. So just feel free to pop on and let us know where you're from, what questions you might have, what's your situation. We'd love to be able to discuss that with you if you're willing to share. So Stephanie, to get us started, I know I read a little bit of your bio, but if you could just share anything that you think is pertinent as far as your family, your homeschooling, and this subject specifically, just what kind of just gets you motivated to work on this subject. And I know your daughter probably is a lot behind that.
Yes, I have 5 children. And one of them has very mild, he was a struggling learner. Mm-hmm. And so he's the one that I actually designed the course that I'm going to be talking about today for.
Awesome.
He's in his 20s right now, and we're working through this very process. And then my daughter is moderate intellectual disability, and she is getting ready to graduate soon. So I've got her coming up behind me. So I'm working this idea from 2 different angles, both the mild angle and the moderate angle. And what I call is one child who has the potential to be independent on his own, and the other one who will likely be independent at home.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I'm glad that you come from both those perspectives, because we have such a wide spectrum of issues that the parents in our community deal with. And so sometimes they're like, that's just not for me, but just hold tight if you've got any student with any type of struggle. And I found that even though I graduated student, thought that, we had done everything, prepared him we're revisiting that again. And so there's, I think, always to have something like this in our toolbox to know that, the world is just a hard place for young people. And so that to know that we can have some ways to help equip them through this process, even after they've launched. But it's always good to prepare ahead of time if you can.
Yes. And this can happen at any time because they may be going down a path and that path kind of peters out and doesn't work. So you can always
Right.
pick up with this. And
Yeah,
this, I
we
think
always
this
wish that
is,
that would work out the first time, but doesn't always.
I changed my major in college 5 times. So I know
Yeah.
that you don't always finish where you started.
Right, exactly. That's really kind of a good topic to get started on is those areas of interest. And maybe we have a student who has lots of areas of interest, or maybe we're not sure if their area of interest is going to lead anywhere or could absolutely lead anywhere. How would you suggest a parent start working with their student to kind of figure out areas of interest, but then also areas of interest that may turn into potentially jobs, areas of study, those types of things?
So looking at it from both, I'll speak first to the person who's likely to be independent, being able to go
Okay.
into the
Yeah.
workforce, whether they live at home or not, but able to function a little bit higher in society than
Hmm.
others. And for that person, if they have any current interest, even if they seem odd, try to
I
uh,
totally agree. Yes.
even if they seem odd, there's probably something that they can do with it.
Yeah.
My the program that I developed was for videography. I mean, that's not weird, but my son, he to this day still says he doesn't know what he wants to do. So I ended up picking the program for him
Ah.
because he couldn't do it when he was. A lot of times our kids have a problem envisioning the future. They just
Oh,
can't do it.
that's a good point.
And if you ask, because you'll hear questions like, well, what do you do after high school? What's it like? What is life like after high school? What am I supposed to do with my time? They can't imagine a future and they can't plan a future. So this is kind of what this is for, to help you, help them.
Right.
And when you're choosing a field of interest, and through the whole process, involve your child as much as you can,
Yeah.
because that's where we're going to talk about this later, but that's where the motivation is going to come from. If I
Mm.
would do this all myself, it would fail because motivating an adult child to do anything once they don't have to do it anymore, like you
Right.
have to school, can be a big issue. And for the more moderate kids with moderate struggles, moderate intellectual disabilities or struggles, you will do more of this yourself, but you still want to involve them as much as possible. And you want to look at their interest, what they do. For example, my son, the reason I chose videography was
Hmm.
because way back middle school, late or early high school, he started a YouTube channel.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he's changed the name of it several times and
Hmm.
changed what's on it, but whatever his current interest is, that's what he's videoing about. And before that, he liked photography.
Okay.
So that
Yeah.
was, so that's kind of why we chose for him. My daughter, on the other hand, she will probably not be in the workplace, at least not full time. And her interest, she's nonverbal, so it's very hard to tell what's going on
Right.
with
Yeah.
her. And she was for a long time caught in those perpetual ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, perpetual
Right.
kindergarten. So we're pulling her out of that. But she's always been interested in fashion.
Hmm.
She loves taking dolls, dressing them, and even and then after she realized you can change dolls like 4 or 5 times a day, she started trying to change her own clothes 4 or 5 times a day. And she
Oh,
can't
wow.
completely dress herself. So sometimes she'll come out of her room and I'm like, whoa, go back in here. We need to know, there are males in the house. Get back in the room.
Yeah.
Uh, so for her, it would be something along the lines of fashion. And
Yeah.
fashion, she likes color, fashion, all those things. So that's how I'm choosing their interests, like looking at what they already know. You can also do things. I
Right.
know Kathy Koch has written the book on the 8 Great Smarts.
Hmm.
And that is very helpful because the smarts are good for not only direction in life, and she does a really excellent job explaining it and how to apply it in your child's life. It's written for kind of the homeschool market, the special needs market in some
Yeah.
ways. And I forgot what I was saying. I got distracted by that. But the 8th grade smarts, but they're also good for leisure activities or for stress reducers, because I found after I learned about the 8th grade smarts, I found that when I'm stressed, I naturally retreat into my smarts. For example,
Ah,
I'm word smart, so I like to read. So that's how I relax is with a book. Or I'm nature smart. I like taking a walk. I like being outdoors, I like being in nature. So those smarts can give you clues to a lot of things, not just the future. It's really good for future. So in that sense, if you notice what your child does when they're stressed, how do they pull back to relax? That's also a
mhm.
clue as to A, what their smarts are, and B, something they might be interested in developing.
Oh, that's a great point. Yes. Because, your child may be good at a lot of things, and then it's hard to deduce. But I love what you said about where do they retreat, because that is like that inborn, like, peace that we have when we do things. And don't you want that, for your child, and to have them in a place where they can show their gifts, but yet not be stressed. And I think that's what we all yearn for in our lifelong work, is to do something that really is fulfilling and peaceful. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
making
sometimes you
money is
don't want to,
great.
you want to leisure activities so that you can get away from all the work.
Right.
But if
Hmm.
your child is stressed, suffers from anxiety or those kind of things,
Yeah.
working within that area of retreat is actually what you talked about, is giving you that peace as you're
Right.
working, and you'll always love
Mm-hmm.
it. You'll always love what you do.
Right. Exactly. Yes. So,
So that was. Oh, go ahead.
yeah. Yeah. So you kind of approach that from both sides, and so, yeah. Anything else on that topic?
No, so that's pretty much the first step, is figure out their field of interest, and if they have several fields of interest, pick one, let them pick
Yeah.
one, preferably.
Mhm.
Let them pick
Yeah.
one and start down that path. And if it doesn't work out, it's okay. They're basically changing their major, which is no big deal.
Right.
If you've
Yeah.
been through that process yourself, you know that changing a major is, you don't really lose, especially in the early parts, you don't lose anything. You're always
Right.
adding to your child. So don't feel like if you spent 2 or 3 years studying something and it doesn't pan out, that's not
Mhm.
lost. I don't think God wastes anything.
No, absolutely not. No, my oldest went and got a welding certificate first, and then decided to go to college after that, and he's like, "I wasted this whole year." And I said, "No, not really." I'm like, "How many engineers actually know how to construct something?"
Right.
Because that is a huge bonus. And really, employers did see that after he graduated too. So yes, there's never anything lost. There's always something that you learn through every single process, even if the process takes your child down a road that is less than what you would have desired for them. We learn through the hard stuff too.
Well,
It's all, yeah.
that's what happened to me. My first major was computer science, and
Mm,
I flunked programming twice and calculus twice. So I
wow.
knew I could not, and I was paying for this myself. So no, I was like
Wow.
burning money on these classes that I couldn't pass. But when I graduated with a degree in, believe it or not, literary studies,
Oh.
that was number five, major number five, literary studies. Um, my first job was an R&D, or research and development place for computers, and my second one was an information technology, one of these big companies. It was Pro
Yeah.
Systems at the time, or it's similar to like Dell or IBM or whatever.
Hmm.
And I became a technical writer, and because even though I flunked those programming classes twice, because I understood programming and what it meant, I was able to be
Right.
a really good technical writer, because I could understand what the programmers were sending me and then
Hmm.
twist it around to put it out there from the user perspective, from the literary studies part of it. So it was
Yes.
really, so that didn't go to waste, even though I didn't even pass it. So don't despair
Right.
if your child that seems to flunk whatever it is you're working on. It's not wasted.
Yeah, that's good encouragement. I love that. So after that step, what would come next?
So, for a child who you're trying to prepare for the workforce, you'd want to start gathering job posting. So,
Huh.
you go to some place. The easiest place to do this is indeed.com,
Yes. Hmm.
INDEED.com. And it's a I believe several job posting sites feed into that one.
I
So
think
it's
so,
not
yeah.
just, one place. So you're getting job postings from a lot of different places in one place. So
Mhm.
what I did was I went there and I started looking at job postings for videographers. And I had no idea what I was going to find because that's not
Right.
my
Yeah.
area of interest or specialty. I have no knowledge of this. So that's also an encouragement for you. Even if you have no
Mhm.
knowledge, you can get that knowledge. So I looked at, and I also looked at several, so I looked at job postings, and I also looked in several geographical areas because my son has
Ah,
indicated that he doesn't want to live where his parents are. Once he's on his own, he wants to be
okay.
away. He wants to like strike out on his own. So I looked at
Mhm.
different geographical areas. And so I was honoring his, requests,
Right.
whether I want them or not. And
Right.
then I wanted to see, and I was looking specifically at pay and job opportunities so that I could see if this was going to be something you can actually make a living at.
Right.
So that was pretty much, step two. So you gather the
Right.
job postings. And then once I did that, I started highlighting the pertinent information in the job postings.
Okay.
And in the case of videography, I was looking specifically at skills. And I immediately noticed that many of the postings mentioned specific equipment that you needed to know. And I
Oh,
further
okay.
noticed there are many areas you could specialize in.
Hmm.
The other thing you want to look for any field you're going into are their certifications. Because my
Right.
husband works in IT.
Mhm.
And once you're in IT, it's all about the certifications, and they want you to be certified in this software because technology is changing so fast. If
Right.
you have a certification, it means that you're up on whatever's current, and
Mhm.
it's easier to get jobs. So even if you don't have a degree plan, if there's a certification that can go with, like if you see those mentioned in the job postings, make a note of those.
Right. Huh.
And that also leads credence to your experience as you're
Hmm.
going through.
Absolutely.
And let me see if there's anything else. Oh, on the other one, so gather job postings. Now, if you have a child who's not going into the workforce,
Right.
they're going to be kind of independent at home.
Mhm.
My focus for my daughter is going to be twofold. A hobby. She likes crafts. She likes working with her
Hmm.
hands a lot.
Mhm.
She likes working with nature. So a hobby craft type thing for her, and instead of job postings, although I could look at, craft websites and things like that.
Yeah.
And I also want her to develop a heart for service
Yes.
to others.
Mm.
And so I'm looking for places that we can serve together, and then I can step back and she can continue to serve. So
Yeah.
I'm looking at opportunities like that. And that kind of comes in later on for the other people, which is hands-on opportunities, but that's the very last step.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's great because and I remember, my son after graduating from college looking through all those Indeed ads, and he's like, "Nope." We'd send my husband and I would be on email alert whenever something new came up. All of us got alerts, and we'd all kind of dig through them, and and it was kind of crazy just the amount of experience or certifications and all of these things, and how good to be that prepared ahead of the game versus when you're looking at it going, oh, no, that doesn't work. This doesn't work. And so I love that idea of getting on there ahead of time and kind of knowing what to expect that you're going to run into when you are trying to find work after you've gone through this process of learning.
Yeah, and you'll start to see patterns of what people are
Mhm.
asking for. So, make
Right.
sure you know those things. And you get an idea also, it can start weeding out things that you don't want to do because
Right,
that helps too.
exactly. Because yes, and we've had this talk with our kids too, is that if you get experience in an area that you don't want to be in for a long time, you may be pigeonholed in that area. And so be very careful, even the kind of jobs that you do accept. Because my son was he graduated in biomedical engineering, and it's like whatever field of medicine you start working in, you're probably going to continue down that pathway because the technology in medical devices is so broad. And so if you specialize in one area, you're going to pretty much stay in that area because that's the area where I was in. I worked with pacemakers my entire career in the medical device industry. And so, yeah, so he's doing 3D printing and loves it. out.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah,
And
3D printing and titanium. It's pretty cool.
see, that's another thing. When I was at the homeschool conference in Colorado, there was
Mhm.
a group there set up and they did 3D printing. And it was another thing that you can look at homeschool conferences for
Yeah.
ideas because there are people out there touting jobs after high school or see what
Mhm.
they're doing. But the 3D printing, and it was a young man, there was a young man there who was interested in, he got interested in that. And then he went on to major in related subjects too when he was later. So homeschool conferences, if you can go to those, if you have opportunity, are a good place to look for that in the vendor hall. Just look around and
Absolutely.
see who's there.
Right, and they may have some resources for you to use even when your student is younger too. Like the software part of that is usually, or like a maker's lab where you can go to if you don't want to buy the 3D printer yourself. So there's a lot of different things available in the
Our local
marketplace.
library has a maker's lab.
Ah, yes, and a
And so
lot of them are doing that now.
check
Mhm.
your library for a maker's lab. And the other things, if you can't go to homeschool conferences, I'm on the one of the Texas homeschool conferences, THSC. Who's that?
THSC, yeah. Mhm.
They are putting all their vendors online, I think,
Ah,
before the conference. And you can even be a vendor online without going to their vendor hall. But
oh,
I
that's
think that's
cool.
something new this year that
Yeah.
with adding people. So they saw their vendor hall, but from now, I think they already have them now. They're letting them put their information up there. So if you can't go to a conference, check
Mhm.
out the vendor hall at the thsc.com,
Right.
I guess.
Mhm.
Texas Homes. What is it? Do you know?
.org. It's .org. THSC.org. Yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
For to look at vendors and what they're doing and what they're putting out there. But anyway,
Yeah.
um, so we're kind of focusing like on the college aspect and going like that. But there are, when you get your list of, when you're looking at things, tailor it to your child. If your child's not going to be in college, because we're kind of talking about people who aren't going to college, that your just think of what they need and try to visualize what their job would be like from just reading through a bunch of job descriptions.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great idea because I think it's fun to do something as a hobby, but how do you turn that hobby into more of a full-time work? And is this something I want to be doing that long, you know?
Well, it's interesting because step 4 is complete a list of skills, tools, and possible areas of specialization. So let
Mhm.
me see. I'm just gonna pull it up and read it. So this was a list I came up of things to know in videography. And
Okay.
I had to look some of these up because I don't know I didn't know what they were.
Oh,
B
okay. Yeah. So
B-roll
we're
footage. Yeah, they wanted people to be able
oh,
to do B-roll footage, and I had to look that up. And that means, for those who are not in the know, it's the whenever you're doing news story, they kind of cut to a scene to like place you where you're at. Or if it's, they're
yes.
talking about a flood and they're transitioning between talking about one thing or talking to another person, they'll show something. That's your B roll. So that's not the A roll of what you're talking to people during a
Mhm.
newscast. They want B-roll footage. So they want you to be familiar with that and be gathering that as you're doing that. So that's
Got it.
something to know about. Creating a shots list, directing, producing, script writing, post-production, sound recording, set up, tear down, and carry equipment. And
Mm.
that is actually the job of the videographer. That's not a separate person unless you're on a big, um,
Wow.
they like kind of have to be their own roadie, so to speak.
Right,
And
exactly.
that's a good thing to know. You have to know all that
Mhm.
stuff, how to maintain the equipment, live feed recording and broadcasting. And these are also, you can specialize. I realize with all this, you can specialize in some of these areas: editing film,
Mhm.
inserting closed captions, graphics, on-screen elements, computer graphics and special effects, animations, lightings, event logistics.
Yeah.
For if you are a videographer, my son just got married a couple of weekends ago,
Mhm.
and they didn't have a videographer, they had photographers. And so they had to know the logistics of the event so that they would be at the right place at the right time to get the pictures.
Right.
Positioning the equipment. So if you're working with cameras, you got to know how to place them,
Mm.
especially on large scale. Uh, Web video codecs, which is about compression, and that's actually you can get a
Yes.
certification in that.
Wow.
Color correction, audio video
Mhm.
transcoding, video storytelling, studio work, outdoor events and positions, planning and organizing. They want you to be detail oriented. And I actually have a list of these and then a little paragraph that I took out that explains exactly what they were looking for. set layout,
Great.
production. I'm going on and on, but
Uh-huh.
audio narration production, project planning, creative design, film editing, film distribution, production lighting and staging. I mean, with videography, there was this. So the good news is when I looked at all of that, just a minute, let me see. There we go. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm not jumping ahead. The thing about it is with all of these different areas that you can work in, first of all, that's really good. But the second thing is with the advent of the internet and video being so popular, yes, you can make a living as a videographer. The job postings were for, like, if you're a wedding videographer, it's like $800, $400 to $800 an event, depending on which company and what location geographically it was.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just one day's work. So you could do that, a few weekend, every weekend during wedding season and then some.
Yeah.
You can specialize in something like that, and then you just have to learn wedding videography. You don't have to learn post-production, pre-production, lighting, staging, all that stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you can specialize, and it's and then the other places I thought were interesting that hire videographers, real estate agents, because they want you to go video the homes, and they want you to also be able to do the photography. So you do photographs, and it was like $100 per home, and however long it took you.
Right.
They're lawyers, and I guess they went to video depositions or video whatever it is lawyers do.
Yeah.
So a lawyer's office, this was actually in Austin, that was looking for a videographer, and government agencies want videographers on staff, especially the ones that are like the State Department, and they want them for making promotional videos for the public, a lot of these government agencies.
Right.
So it was just crazy. And even the government jobs were paying $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 a year.
Wow.
With experience. That's not just starting out.
Exactly.
But so so videography is something you can make a living wage at. So I was very thrilled to see that. So that's one of the things you're going to want to check is, it's a big enough field. Actually, it doesn't really have to be a big field, because I'll tell you about another job. Yeah. My daughter-in-law's father, his career was adjusting the compasses on ships. That was his whole job. He said he would in repair, and he did that for years. And he was one of only like 8 people in the United States who had that job.
Wow.
And his specialty, and it always had to be updated because the magnetic north is always shifting, and every time magnetic north shifts, the ships have to recalibrate their compasses, or they're off course. You start out for France and you end up in Africa.
Yeah.
So
that'd be bad.
I'm on the East Coast, so that's the analogy there. So it's fascinating. So it doesn't really have to be a large field like I was talking about. It can just be a really tiny field, but it should be something that they're interested in and that they can potentially learn and do.
Right. Yeah.
And for the independent at home, some of these things you may be working on are just life skills. And
absolutely.
So you could be your 2 to 4 year program could be working on life skills. And the reason you want to do that is because you want your child to be as independent as possible for 2 reasons.
Yeah.
One is we were created to be independent. We were created for relationship, but we were also created to exercise free will and to be productive, to give back to society and all that stuff.
Right.
Independence. And the other thing I want to mention about independence is it takes thinking skills, because you have to be able to reason through a process to be independent. But the biggest thing about helping your child be as independent as possible, because the more independent they are, the more free time you have. And that,
we all want more of that.
So once your child is out from under the government regulations of public school of age 18, they're mandatory attendance in school till 18. So once they're out under that, this is your time to create the program that you want, doing exactly what is right for your child. You don't have to worry about academics. You don't have to report it to anyone.
Yes.
You're just doing it for your child and for your child's sake. And hopefully, in some states, you can do that, as early as you want. But other states, it's just very freeing to get out.
Absolutely.
I'm approaching that, and it's very freeing to think about, I don't have to worry about, any of those requirements. I can do it the way I want to, using whatever I want and how I want to. So that's my encouragement for the kids who, even if they just need life skills, because if they're going to be independent at home with you for the rest of their lives, don't be discouraged. Spend that time just as if someone goes to college for 4 years after high school to really zero in on a career, and then they start a career. Because even in the trades, the welding program you mentioned is like a 3-year apprenticeship program. An electrician to be a journeyman is a 5-year apprenticeship program. So you should expect your child to need an additional several years to be truly independent, whether that's financially or at home. So don't be afraid. Don't think that, oh, this is the rest of my life. Whatever you see in high school, that's it. That's not true, because you've still got years, if you would like, to continue that process transition to adulthood.
Yeah, it's nice to know that there's that freedom, that you can wait until after high school to kind of transition into this. Well, let's start working on your interests. We've gotten as far as we needed to, following all the state requirements. And yet, if you have a child who's gifted, like my youngest, who we kind of extended her schooling while she was in high school because we had nothing better to do with her, because she had kind of had that gifted bent, and it was like, well, I don't want to just keep advancing you. You need to figure out what you're going to do. So we kind of paired what you talked about with her high school, just to challenge her. But every student's different, and it's nice to know you have that freedom to either do it in combination or do it in progression, and wherever they need it, and not feel like I'm not doing enough or I'm doing too much. It can all be based on the student and what they need to be prepared. And like you said, however long doesn't.
Yeah. Because even if it takes to age 30, the late bloomer.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
The other thing I was going to mention here is, if you have a child who is way behind the curve on like 2 or more years behind in their, which is my specialty, behind grade level, you can kind of calculate, the older they are, the easier this is. You can kind of calculate where they'll be at graduation, or even 4 years after graduation. If your child, example, my daughter, she has been tracking, at least on her interest level, not academically, but interest level, exactly half her physical age is her neurological age and her interest. So right now she's into dolls and Barbies and things like that. And that's about half her age. And it has changed. But, like Dora the Explorer lasted 6 years.
Wow.
And SpongeBob was only 2, thankfully, because she used to scream like SpongeBob. I didn't realize how much SpongeBob screamed, especially in the early seasons, the first 2 seasons, until she started watching. She started screaming all the time, like, what is going on? And it was SpongeBob. Don't let your kid watch SpongeBob if they scream. But so you can kind of calculate. So I think, well, if when she's going to be 30, she'll be like high school level. 40, she might actually be college ready, things like that. Right. And it's kind of hard to think about that, because think, oh, my child, she's so far behind. But that's just who they are. That's how God made them, and that's how they're going to be, unless something dramatically changes. But if they've been steadily growing and not regressing, then you have kind of a roadmap to use to plan the future. So don't shy away from that. Calculate that number.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And we have one viewer that's watching on YouTube has made some comments and asked about tips for adults who want to do like independent learning at home by themselves. I would say, I'm guessing, just like you did, go to Indeed, figure out just job listings and things, and kind of go from there themselves, and figure out, their area of interest. And I mean, there's so many free even like courses out there that you can take, college courses that you won't get credit for, but you can definitely learn.
Actually, we're
I know
getting to
there's
that in step
just so
7.
many resources. Okay, so let's, I won't get ahead of you, but I think we're going to talk about schedules next and planning. Is that correct?
Yes. So the step after this one is the one where you're talking about.
Okay,
So
but
create a
schedules are good because we
realistic.
can kind of have to know what we're going to do.
So the next step, and this is kind of the same thing you would do as you're planning out a school year, create a realistic yearly calendar. For my son, I'm giving him, depending on where the holidays fall, 5 to 7 week stretch to do a course, and then a week off, and then another 5 to 7 week. And then I think in the summer, there's 2 week stretches, and then around the Christmas holidays, there's another 2 weeks off. But the rest of that, it's year-round school. Otherwise, I'm afraid if we take a break, it would never keep going. So having that week off. And the other thing is, I'm running it more like a college course, which actually our local community college, not only do they have semesters and quarters, they have even shorter courses now. And you can take a 4-week course, and it's an intensive for that amount of time. And I have found that working intensively on a subject instead of, slogging through it is really, really helpful, especially for my son, but also for my daughter. So don't try to stick to semesters. That's my advice. Don't try to do semesters in this program. Do a few weeks on, 1 week off, few weeks on, 1 week off, and finish a course. And then when we go into this the next step is to lay out a 2 to 4 year plan of study to fit your child's needs. And that's where you go on and find the courses that you want. And if your child wants to do them alone, wants to do self-study, this is perfect, because what you're doing here is you're laying out a scope and sequence that lasts 2 to 4 years. That's really all you're doing. So if you're familiar, and if you're not familiar with scope and sequence, open any book that you have for teaching, and the table of contents is right there. That's your scope and sequence. So you're creating a table of contents for your kids after high school experience. And the places to find courses are, I found several that are decent. If you want a college level course, and you can actually get a certificate of completion if you pay for it. If not, it's free. It's called Coursera.
Yes. That's
Course RA. So it's .com. Coursera. And I've actually taken a course on there. I didn't do it for credit, but I took gamification. It was fascinating. And then they're taught at the college level. And if you're not paying for it, your projects are peer reviewed. So you have to review other students' work, or your child would, and then they review his or hers.
Okay.
So that one's the highest level. This could be the highest level. There are other things like that too. I don't know the names of them, but that's the one I'm familiar with. But all the big universities submit classes, and a few foreign universities. Yeah. The best 2 places I found are Skillshare.com. Actually, there are 3. There are 3 you can go to look for courses. Skillshare.com, and they have an annual membership. So you can pay these next 3 places. You can pay for individual courses, or you can get a membership, which is extremely cheap, and you can take as many classes as you want. So it's like $100 and something for the membership.
Oh, wow.
Or you can pay, $40 per class. But if you have the membership. Skillshare.com. There was something that used to be called lynda.com, lynda.com, that had a bunch of it. Was mostly like business classes. Like, I started out kind of doing like Microsoft Office and things like that, but expanded into all kinds of things. And that company was purchased by LinkedIn. So now I think it's called LinkedIn Learning. You'll have to search on that.
I think I've seen that recently. Yes.
So LinkedIn Learning, they bought lynda.com. So it's so they have a boatload of courses already in there. And they're relatively inexpensive. And I can't for the life of me think of the third one.
Well, you can send it to me and we'll put it in the show notes.
Because it was, it's one that I use. So I can't believe I can't think of it right now. If it comes me, I'll let you know. If not, I'll send it to
Yep.
you afterwards. The
Sounds good.
So you find, and these places have courses. And so the videography course, this is where my son's taking the videography course.
Yeah.
So I typed in videography, and I had my list of everything that he should know to
Right.
apply for a job as a videographer. And
Mhm.
there are lots of classes, and they can be specialized. And so I look at the teacher reviews, the student reviews, the course reviews, how recent they are, things like that.
Right.
And if you find, and the other thing I kind of look for is a teacher that has several courses. So if you find a good teacher, you can stick with that same teacher, which really helps our kids.
Yes,
They
absolutely.
find someone.
The teaching
And,
style and types of
and I let him,
requirements.
yeah.
Mhm.
So I gave him a list of 3 or 4, like I wanted a general overview of videography for him. So I gave him a list of 3 or 4, suggested which one I would take.
Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't hold back. I'll have to do that better in the future. And then he chose one of the courses, and he took it in that first 7-week period, and he completed it, and he liked it. And so because he still doesn't have an idea of what to do, he's willing to continue to work on it because he likes videography. And so it's so even if he's never going to do it, he's learning stuff that he likes to do anyway.
That's great. Yeah. A lot of times if you give them that choice and that the buy-in is much higher because they know they chose it. And then if it ends up being something, like you said, that I don't know if I'm going to use this or not, everything comes around. You just never know. And I think to reassure them, you just don't know, maybe you picked this for another intention and it's going to come up that maybe some job that you look at, this is going to be something they're going to require, even though you would never really use it a lot. But yeah, always good to put a good spin on that and let them know that their work will never go to waste.
Right. And the whole point of independence is making your own decisions. So you
Yes,
want, at this
absolutely.
stage, especially if they're already out of high school or
Mhm.
getting close to it, you really want them to be making those decisions because they need to start owning their life.
Yes.
And it is
Yep.
very difficult for those kids who can't envision a future to own that future. So
Yeah.
it really helps to get them, you're starting that kicking them out of the nest kind of thing.
Yeah. Yep. Slowly and very carefully.
So
Yeah.
carefully moving them toward that independence that you want and they want. You may
Mhm.
not think you
Yeah.
want it. It may be
Yeah.
scary. That's the other thing, is it may be scary for you to think of your child going out into the world and being independent and being on their own.
Right.
That's kind of a separate issue from this. This is giving your child a way to support themselves, whether they're still at
Right.
home or out in public. Those are kind of 2 separate things. Now, you can include life skills in this plan. If your child wants to move out on their own, then give them those life skills to do it, even if it never happens. Because if you think about it, once you got out of high school and you were out of your parents' home, all the decisions you got to make for yourself, whether they were good or bad, you lived or died by your decisions.
Right.
I know I made several bad ones. And but that's how you learn. So
Exactly.
you have to let your child fail, but to help them to be the most helpful, they have to fail forward. You don't want them failing backwards where they get
Right.
discouraged and don't want to move forward anymore. So when they fail, you kind of set them up to fail forward into learning.
Yes. Yep.
From the mistakes.
Exactly. Because yes, learning sometimes can be very painful. That's the most memorable learning we have. So what about keeping track of progress? And how do we, how do you plan to do that, or how are you doing that with both of your students?
For my son, my 2-year, my scope and sequence is basically keeping track of his courses that he took online. And we're also doing remedial work. I didn't mention that.
Oh, okay.
Because he's not real strong in math. So he's focusing heavily, intensely on the core subject matter that he's learning, the videography courses, but we're also doing remedial work alongside it at a slower pace, just so that he can strengthen those skills at the end of 2 years. Hopefully he'll be more confident in those areas. So the plan is, as we're going through, just keeping a list of it. And the reason you want to do that is it's basically your child's resume.
Right.
You don't, there are a lot of things, and videography was one of the things that doesn't require a college degree. Its high
Hmm.
school diploma is fine on
Yeah.
most of the jobs. Some of the government jobs required it, but most of them, high school diploma was fine.
Hmm.
But if you can, on a resume, say, and these are all the courses I've taken
Hmm.
alongside the experience that your child has, then
Right.
that will go a long way towards employment. So
Hmm.
that's why you want to keep track, even though you're not required to, and you're not going to get grades for these things, and that's fine. But you can
Right.
show coursework. You list it on the resume as coursework, and then list out all the classes that are relevant to the job that you're applying to.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. Because yeah, and any help that, especially for a student, I know, um, just helping them to keep track of those things is a lot of the difficult work usually for our kids that kind of struggle in that area. It's just, can we come alongside them and help just organize all of that information and put it into a neat and easy to read and convey way for them to share with others and to really be able to articulate what they know and what they've learned.
Right. And that's a good point, because along with the academic part of it, or the career part of it, or the you want to be working on the life skills, like that's we
Hmm.
call it executive function. So you want to
Right.
be working on all those life skills that they'll need to be independent.
Yeah. So what would you say as far as like then getting job experience?
Well, that's kind of the final step, but it can be happen at any time. It's the final step in the list, but it can happen any point along the way.
Hmm.
And that's look for hands-on learning opportunities. For example, when I was in college, I always tried to get a job. I was putting myself through college, so I had to work.
Hmm.
So I always tried to get at least one job that was or free internship, whatever, unpaid internship
Right.
that related to my major, to see if I really wanted to do it, which
Oh, that's good.
helped me
Hmm. Yeah.
which helped me change my major.
Right.
Several times at one point. So I went from computer science to interior design,
Oh,
and I got a job designing beauty salons. There was a little design up on the board in our back in the day, before there was, online boards. You
oh
had like
yeah,
a physical
exactly.
cork
Yep.
board in the
Yeah.
hallway.
Uh-huh. Yeah, with a pin in it.
Stuck
Yes.
in it, stick a pin in it. It was on the board, and it was a woman wanted someone to design beauty salons, and I was like,
Hmm.
okay, I'll do that, and for free, and that was fine, because I just wanted
Hmm.
the experience. And I realized during that process, she ended up opening 3 of them, and I designed all 3 of them for her. But I realized that unless you're really good at design, you're just going to be a yes man. That even if
Yeah.
you think what they're doing is wrong, even if you don't like the colors, even if you think, you're just a yes man.
Hmm.
And I was like, I don't want to do that. I'm a creative.
Yeah.
I want to create and
Hmm.
move on. So I realized very quickly that that wasn't what I wanted to do, but it was
Yeah.
because I had that hands-on experience. So don't be
Hmm.
surprised if you give your child hands-on experience. That's one of the fastest ways to eliminate a career path, is
Absolutely.
get
Hmm.
something related to it. And then you may not still not know what they want to do, but you'll definitely know what they don't want to do. And that's how my years in college, it was a process of eliminating what I knew what I didn't want to do.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's another helpful way. It doesn't have to
Hmm.
be always moving to something. You can just be moving away from something, and that's
Right.
good enough.
And that's
And
good to
yeah,
know as a parent that that is progress. A lot of times we see it as failure, but really it is. It's getting you closer to what eventually they will do. Instead of going down this road that way too long that you could have diverted from before then and spent less time and energy and probably a lot of struggles along the way in trying to get your student to do something that they really truly didn't want to do. So, yeah, great advice.
yeah.
But
So, and for my son, for example, so this could be things like, it could be a paid job, it could be an
mhm.
internship, either paid or unpaid, volunteer work, or it can just be a class that's classified as a fun class or a fun
Oh,
group,
yeah.
or you
Mhm.
can just be doing things with a group,
Mhm.
um, like a club
Yeah.
that's related to it. For my son, who just graduated from college in finance, they had an investing club on campus,
Hmm.
and he was part of that. It was actually money someone donated to the university, like millions of dollars, and they had these
Wow.
kids with the teacher monitoring it, but
Right.
actually investing that money in the stock market so they could get experience doing that. So
Wow.
you can even look for clubs that
Yep.
relate to photography club, a videography
Hmm.
club, an investing club, a Lego
Yeah.
club. If they're doing engineering and building work,
Amazing how
do
many they have
those,
out there. Yeah. Yeah.
robotics, the Lego clubs,
Hmm.
all those things. And if they don't have one um, in your area, start one.
Yep.
You can always
Absolutely.
start one, because I know that's another
Hmm.
issue that our kids have is sometimes social interactions. So you could
Right.
start a club related to
Hmm.
that, and that might be a way to start developing friendships as well as shared experience. And if possible, don't be the person to lead the club. Let your child
Exactly. Let your
experience
child.
learning from someone else. You may need to start it, because I helped start several
Hmm.
things, but I didn't have to. The reason I started the robotics club was I was teaching computer. I never told them that I flunked programming, but I was
Oh.
teaching computer programming. I was teaching computer science. It was a little bit. It was the easy stuff. Okay, I could
Uh-huh.
do the easy stuff. Uh, but there's a group of students that wanted to start a robotics club, so the dads led it. I just put it together and started
Yeah.
it, and then I
Uh-huh.
was able to turn them over and let them. The dads like
Hmm.
really got into it. I was like, ooh, I'm stepping back.
Mm-hmm.
So you may have that opportunity to do that. So yeah, so get something started if there's not something. Um,
It's great
for him
advice.
also, I
Yep.
wanted him to create an Etsy shop selling printables, maybe get some of that graphic
Oh, yeah.
experience, graphic
Hmm.
design stuff. He hadn't bought into that yet, but we're working on it. But the other thing about having a shop like that is learning business principles.
Oh,
Because if
absolutely.
you're a videographer, a lot of those jobs were self-employment. You're a
Yes.
contractor.
Hmm.
So you have to learn how to basically manage yourself as a business.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
YouTube channel, same ways, since he already has the YouTube channel, to pick a topic. And I want him to do, because he's learning how to cook, to be on
Ah.
his own. So I want him to do like a cooking one.
Hmm.
Or he also likes travel, so a travel channel. And we live in
Yeah.
an area that is full of history. We have Revolutionary
Yeah.
history, Civil War history, the whole DC thing. We have like everything
Right.
is right here. But he hadn't bought into that yet either. So
Yep.
you have to get your child. I mean, if they don't
Yep.
want to
Give
do
them
it,
some ideas and
he
yep.
goes,
Just
I would do
pray that they'll
travel if
stick.
it wasn't in my area, because it's I can't do travel because I live here. And I'm like,
Oh.
no, that's how you start it, because you live here. The whole reason to do it is because you live here. But
Right.
that's not the way he thinks. So I'm trying to
Mhm.
honor that. I'm trying to.
Right.
Um, that's kind
Very
of funny.
wise. Yes. That is really hard. I mean, it's hard being a parent of adult kids. And, I'm in that same place too. And you can make suggestions, but really you have no control anymore. And you just have to be as much influential and love them through, just these paths that they take. And eventually they'll either find something that you never even thought of or say, oh, I think you were right. And either way,
That's
you
a
have to
long
say,
time coming.
"Oh, yes, I know." Oh, yes.
That was one of the questions someone asked me when I was explaining how I did this with my son. They said, "Well, but how do you ever motivate them to do that?"
Yeah,
And that's
right.
tricky, because, like I said, once they're out of high school, they realize they don't have to do anything anymore except live
Yeah.
off mom and dad if they if they can think at that
Mhm.
level. Um,
Right.
I mean, it's comfortable. They get comfortable.
Yes.
Now, I will say this: my son had a traumatic experience toward the end of high school. So he
Mhm.
really needed a year or two off after high
Mm.
school. He needed a gap year or two. So
Yeah.
don't be afraid to don't think like you have to jump into all this stuff. Your child, you're as a homeschooler, you're probably a natural teacher anyway. You're probably like always teaching. As a matter of
Right.
fact, my kids who, when they were done, they
Hmm.
moved out of the house and they come back and I still want to do all the teaching stuff. And they're like,
Right.
Mom, stop momming me.
Oh.
I have to stop momming my kids, and it's really that teacher instinct.
Right.
So the motivation comes from autonomy, being able to make their own decisions, and
Yeah.
really being able not being manipulated into it, not being
Mhm.
cajoled into it, and letting them fail,
Yeah.
letting them see the consequences. Again, because their thinking process, they can't always picture things. You have to explain in a gentle
Yeah.
way. about the failures, because a lot of times, especially if your child has anxiety or OCD or whatever, or they live in fight or flight mode, any kind of failure, any kind of a perceived threat is detrimental to the process. So what you want to do in that case is never ask, I've had to learn this, never ask a direct question.
Oh, that's, yeah.
You can,
Very
because
wise.
that sets off the fight or flight, especially in an area that's uncomfortable, like your future and being independent and all the anxiety that goes with that. And like, you know, how do I afford it and how can I live there? The other thing you can do to encourage this participation is this, and we had to do this, come up with a budget of how much it costs to live at home. How much, and reduced rent, like just ours, we decided on $200 would be rent if he was working and could pay for it. And then on top of that, how much would car insurance be if he was paying his portion?
Right.
How much of the phone bill, the utilities, the internet, and this is just his portion of it, not on his own. And what we did was, as he starts working and as he earns money, he has to start paying us for some of those things. That is, so because that whole idea, because his mind is all or nothing. Either I can afford to live on my own or I can't. And if I can't, then I have all this money. I can spend it however I want. I'm like, that's how it works. So what we did was we came up with a budget and said, you know, you're going to start paying. There's things he already pays for. He has a dog. And so he pays for the dog food and he pays for his gas and he pays for, you know, his own discretionary entertainment spending kind of stuff, eating out, all that. Yeah. But we're like, okay, when you get a paycheck, you need to give us this much, you know, pay off these little cheap things. Like the phone is like $15 for his portion. Right. And pay us for the utilities, start paying for those cheaper things so that he gets the idea. And the very first time he ever did that, it was amazing. He was like, you could just see the pride in himself after being so discouraged seeing his brothers move out of the house and become independent, and he's still stuck at home. Right. Just, you know, you would not realize this, but making him pay his way, even that little bit. Right. He blossomed. It just gave him a pride in himself that wasn't there before because he's always so discouraged about his struggles. Yeah. So it's give him some ownership of don't be afraid to start charging your child to live at home. And our intent is to hopefully put the money aside, and then when he's ready to move out, then he has a little chunk of money to saved up. Saved up to start with, to buy a car, to pay all the deposits on the apartments and any utilities and all that stuff. Right. So there's a whole plan behind it, but that's how you get the buy-in, is you let them own it, fail, and pay their way. Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. This hour was a great conversation, Stephanie, on so many levels. I appreciate all that you've shared. We only got a couple minutes left, and I'd love for you to share your websites and what people can find on there so they can connect with you and continue being encouraged and equipped by you. Okay, thank you. Well, one of them is right here, elarplearning.com. And that's where my homeschool curriculum is. There's a freebie on there. I think it's freebie on the menu. You sign up and you can see some of the curriculum in the shop there. And I explain the ELARP method and what it means and how it works and who it's for. And then I have another website called artofspecialneedsparenting.com. And it started out one way, but I am slowly, especially coming into the new year, I will be changing that over to working primarily on functional life skills, especially for those with moderate intellectual disability, and the life skills that the parents need when they enter the special needs lifestyle. Because I have found that there's so many things I had to learn or relearn to do in a different way to accommodate the life of my special needs child. Now, I had it easy because I had other children, and so I had a baseline, and so I can compare and change. And so my goal is to teach parents, especially those who don't have those other kids to start from, and
Yeah.
That's
Mhm.
really hard. I appreciate that, and all you
Yeah.
parents have that. So
Right.
those are my two websites.
All right. Yeah. So check out specialneedsparenting.com and elarplearning.com. Those are Stephanie's two sites. And we'll have those links plus some of the other links that Stephanie talked about in our show notes, whether you're listening to the podcast or watching on YouTube. And so that you can just click on those links and go right to that information. And next week, we are going to kind of continue to talk about learning. Kind of wasn't my theme for the month, but it seems like that's where we are. But Andrew Fan is going to come and talk about homeschool curriculum customization methods. And so we're going to dive into that a little bit next week. So you want to join us for that. But thank you, Stephanie, again for being on the show. If you haven't heard any of other Stephanie's interviews, you'll have to go back on our YouTube channel or on the podcast and search for Stephanie Buckwalter. And we'll try to put links in the show notes as well for past interviews, because Stephanie has a lot of wisdom to share, as you can tell. So thanks again for being a guest. Appreciate you so much, and all that you're doing to encourage homeschoolers, especially in this realm of, having children with intellectual disabilities and moderate disabilities, and just how to teach them with honor and honoring them for who God made them to be.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, until next week, everyone, have an awesome week, and I'll see you back here, same time, same place on Empowering Homeschool Conversations. Have a blessed week. Bye.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool. Go to spedhomeschool.com to get resources and support for teaching your unique learner at home.